We've all heard the promise, don't worry, even if I get married, nothing in our friendship will change. But as we get older, we realize that's not quite true, is it? Today, I'm talking about a memoir that hit me right in the heart, especially when it comes to the evolving shape of female friendships. Welcome to Pages and Afterwards. My name is Lily. This is a place where I give voice to the feelings, questions, and lingering echoes that remain after finishing a book. No polished reviews or deep analysis here, just honest thoughts and casual reflections on the books I read. So let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Pages and Afterwards, everybody. The book I'm going to talk about today is Everything I Know About Love by Dolly Alderton. I think this is the very first non-fiction book I read this year and talk about in this podcast in 2026. And Dolly Alderton is a screenwriter and an author of multiple books. I think one of her most famous work, or something that first got her well known, is her Sunday Times columns. So this book is a kind of like a memoir of Dolly from growing up in North London, Stanmore specifically, to messaging boys on MSN messengers in her teenage era, and to finding the best parties to go to during uni, and living with your friends post graduation, and all the searches and experiences of love Dolly herself experienced or witnessed her friends experience into her 30s. This is kind of the book that as she approaches her 30s, the tone shifts from her early teenage era to 20s and early, full-time working adult. And it becomes so much more profound as the book progresses. So let's get into my thoughts and feelings. So first of all, I've personally have never read any of Dolly's columns before, but I picked up this book as the title seemed intriguing and relatively seemed timely for like the season or the phase of the life I was in back then. Somehow I had high hopes for this book just by the title, and this did not disappoint, even though the beginning was not as spectacular as I expected. But weirdly, frankly speaking, I did not know what exactly I was expecting from this book. And so I don't know, just like the title seemed intriguing enough and seemed very relative to my life in that particular moment. And I don't know if I was expecting like a real life story, or if I was expecting to get some kind of like epiphany reading this, or I don't know. And it may not have been exactly what I expected, but it turned out to be a great read. And this book was really, really easy to read, and it was actually fun to be able to recognize the towns or the streets or the places that gets named in this book, and I can kind of envision it in front of me while reading. Like, for example, when Dolly and her friends shared a house in Camden after graduating from university, I was like, where is that street? Is it near like XYZ? As if like I used to be the neighbor or something like that. This book has like so many different chapters and good ones as well, but one of the hardest hitting chapters of all the content that was in this book was called Nothing Will Change. In this chapter, Dolly describes the sense of loss and betrayal she feels when her best friend, Farley, from childhood, moves out of the house that they shared in Camden and moved in with her boyfriend. Dolly and Farley grew up together in Stanmore, so they've known each other for years. You know, they're the best. They are the best friends from childhood. Like they even went to the same university, you know, in Exeter. And I can see how hard it is to go from like spending pretty much most of the waking hours together, like since childhood, and knowing the ins and outs of the events and incidents and experiences that the other person has been going through, like in real time sense, to catching up every few months over dinner or drinks and just talk about highlights or snippets of the other person's life, you know, just like, you know, everything that was happening, like going from knowing everything that was happening in the other person's life to just basically doing a catch up every so often. And obviously Farley senses this, like what Dolly was feeling, so she would say like assuring things like, oh, nothing will change between us, you know. But obviously we all know that it most definitely will. We know it will. We say that all the time, but we know it will. And people moving on to a different phase of their life, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a great thing. But I think we are deceiving ourselves when we say that, oh, nothing between us will change, because it does. I have an experience where my like circle of friends would change, or people I hang out with change when I'm single and the other people that I used to hang out with are now married or have kids, you know. I can no longer expect them to come to like last minute coffee or last minute drinks or maybe just like spontaneous holidays over the long weekend, you know, because they have other engagements now. And obviously it's going to be it's going to be so much easier for me to ask other friends that are single or that are in the same or similar phase of the life, you know, because they don't really have to check with their family whether they can come with me on a holiday or not, you know. So you can't, so and then that kind of puts like a farther distance between you and your friends, because you're no longer doing the things that you used to do together. And there's so much that you don't know about what's happening in their family life because you don't have your own. So you can only imagine, but you can never understand exactly what they're going through, right? So you kind of lose familiarity with your best friends or your circle of friends when they are in a different life stage from yours, you know? And there are some quotes that I really, really liked from this chapter. So let me introduce them one by one. So the first one is, nothing will change. It drives me bananas. Everything will change. The love we have for each other stays the same, but the format, the tone, the regularity, and the intimacy of a friendship will change forever. And the second one is, little did I know how much work it takes to sustain that kind of intimacy with a friend as you get older. It doesn't just stick around coincidentally. Like those two quotes, or like those two passages in the book, just hit me hard. Like just the second one, I remember talking about this sentiment in an episode where I covered The Light We Carry by Michelle Obama. You know, you need to make a conscious effort to keep the familiarity or keep the like a closeness between you and your friends, because people have all those different things that they are responsible for. They, you know, they have to prioritize. So if you don't consciously maintain your friendship with your friends, then slowly it would just kind of disappear, right? And it's not that you stop caring for each other, I think, but it's more like you have other priorities and engagements, you know. You become not necessarily the first contact whenever you're having a happy moment or a sad moment or need someone to talk to. So yeah, like just like exactly what Dolly says, like the love that you have for each other remains the same, but how you express it or the way it kind of materializes itself is going to be very different. And this book actually keeps getting better and better as she approaches her 30s, aka around my age. Like, lots of the sentiments that she describes in the book like speaks really true of my experience as well. And this is definitely the book that I highlighted most in 2026 so far. So I don't want to make this episode into like giant quotes from the book, but let me just introduce a couple more sentences from her final chapters. So the first one is, nearly everything I know about love, I've learned in my long-term friendship with women, particularly the ones I have lived with at one point or another. Second one is, love is quiet, reassuring, relaxing, pottering, pedantic, harmonious hum of a thing. Something you can easily forget is there, even though its palms are outstretched beneath you in case you fall. I think these are such a powerful reminder that love isn't just about romance. You can learn about love through your friendship. So, yeah, that's all from me today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. So, thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode gave you something to think about, maybe about your own love, maybe something that you've learned in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the channel or leave a comment. That will help me keep going. So I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.